All right, welcome to Pass the Mic. It is Friday, March 28th, 2025, episode 156, spring break. Hard to believe, but March is already over. Mike Gervasi, hello.
March is over. How you doing?
What does that say? In like a lion, out like a lamb, or something?
Yeah, I
Is that
mean, it
how it
seems like
goes? What is
February
that?
and
What's that mean? It comes in rough and it goes out easy?
it sounds right. You think about January felt like it took 8 months, and then February and March combined feel like they took half a month.
I sent this text the other day because this week back here, of course, everyone's on spring break in various parts of warm weather, and we're here in Brownstown. This week has been awful. Now, today the sun is out. We're recording this on Thursday, the 27th. It does look like it finally warms up a little bit this weekend. And I sent this in the text. March, I think we've had this discussion before. I think March is again, I don't know if I said it before. I know we mentioned February and March is the worst month in Michigan. It is the worst
Yeah,
month weather-wise. And again, it comes down to thinking it's going to be nice.
right.
And it never is. It's 31 days wasted. There might be like one or two that are good.
Yeah. I think tomorrow's gonna be nice. We had a couple days there a couple weeks ago, and then it just the rug was pulled out from under us right away, and spring break has been the worst. Snow, yeah, it's been terrible.
Oh, gray, the wind. I don't know what and I saw
I
a story the
know.
other day. This has been one of the windiest winters on record in Michigan, which I don't like. I know all these weather people keep that data, but again, I'm just getting that off my chest. I'm glad March is over. In like a lion, out like a
Yeah.
whatever. All right, feedback and errors. Speaking of people traveling around, the PACs, Miss PAC, Sarah PAC gave an input on the nursing. That home care nursing is where it's at, and that's what we sort of talked about with Elizabeth last week. There are so many fields that you should be able to find what you love, right? Like for us in education, you pick a grade level. You can sometimes be flexible between middle school and for us, we could drop to middle school. For elementary, they can rise up to middle school. You sort of get that bridge, but it's really not that different. I guess, suburban school, rural school, but
Yeah, and I mean subject area can be different too. I know you in the library are sort of limited, but we could have picked different things. So
so home care nursing, she is all about it. And
yeah.
Tom Pack still was able to we said, no pressure. We're not going to dock your pay if you don't get the video collage up. And the good news is he got the video collage up. So keep your eye out for that direct deposit, Tom.
Don't tell Dr. Rice so.
Yes. So you got any other feedback?
Yeah, Antoine, pass the Mitch. I love that he says that. He's enjoyed watching Grace for years. Elizabeth mentioned they don't show the nurses' inner workings, but I thought this whole time they were giving us kind of what the surgeons go through. It is just a show, though. It's getting real watered down, however, in his mind. Meredith doesn't even make appearances on there that much anymore, and these newbies aren't doing it for me. And he also wanted to reiterate he doesn't want the smoke with the Pates, so he's saying all those things politely.
Okay.
Um, and then I just was turned. I don't know how I missed this, so I really can't comment too much. But Nick Gagne, he went a little deeper. The viewpoint is slanted on the issue of boys in school. It raises some interesting points. The same path doesn't be for everyone, but it would be a shame if higher education starts to become devalued. When it comes to how boys in schools view certain professions, I think it's cool you have different professionals come into your classes, so maybe that's an opportunity to showcase some of those heel things that I had mentioned before. So thank you for that, Nick. I apologize. I don't know how I missed it. Usually I'm up on the comments, but I missed this one, so I'll certainly dig into this one on my own time.
Coach Tony, who by the way went and saw the first round action with the Spartans that was in Cleveland, right?
Yeah,
Went to both games, had a good time there. He said today Downriver and friends, tomorrow in the world. When we
yeah.
mentioned the thanks, Coach Tony. I don't know if we haven't heard from our fan that was looking for a
No,
podcast.
she must not have been that. She must not have been that enamored with
Maybe
us.
she's starting with episode one, and she doesn't
Well,
know that we're talking about her yet.
Well, Sean, Sean, who ironically we're gonna be hanging out with tonight, asked if we're gonna wear our Pass the Mic gear when we go out and try to impress the patrons tonight
Yeah,
when we go downtown.
maybe we'll get in a budget meeting and see what we can. We have to do like a live, like a what do they call it? Like an in-person episode,
Yeah,
like
we've
a
been talking about
like
that.
yeah, like Joe's prime time. Maybe he'll let us record there. I just want to make double check and make sure that I got everything on my list. And but back to the feedback on the shows. We were sort of in a group text this week. I'm all caught up on the pit, but I think Thursday nights are the new episode. And Elizabeth mentioned the baby delivery episode. I watched that as real. Again, I'm not saying the medical is real, but you watch a baby delivery, like it's HBO Max, so you see the whole delivery process. reminded me of health when I was in seventh grade. I still remember Mr. Sladish's room. That's the last time I watched a video like that because both of my kids were C-sections. So I've now seen it twice. Um, but there was the most recent
Why are we
episode.
doing this?
I just want to say that again, the most recent episode is a mass shooter, and we talked about the
Ooh,
very graphic, but it was very interesting to see on the hospital side of how they would prepare for something like that. We live on the edge of we're always being prepared for it on the school side.
sure,
You always hear about it from law enforcement. There's law enforcement in our building. We talk about like, okay, how are they going to handle this? Seeing how hospitals have plans for this too. Sometimes we get selfish, or I guess blinders on in schools and say, oh, we're the only ones that have to deal with this. We're not. There's other people that I'm sure, and they talked about this. Okay, we're doing our training. We got this is the mode, and it was really interesting to watch. So even if you can't handle the gore, I thought it was a really interesting
sure.
episode. This week
Sounds it.
it ends in the middle of it, so we don't know what's going on. So all right, Mike of the week. Who do you got this week?
So again, tournament week. I try to keep it when I have a mic. I try to keep it with a theme. I'm bringing a Spartan up. My Michigan fans friends are going to be upset, but I think when you hear why, it's former Michigan State Spartan from the early '90s, Mike Peplowski, who
Oh
was a
yes,
second round pick in the NBA. Now,
wow.
I brought him up first off because again it is tournament week and big weekend for both Michigan and Michigan State fans. Big basketball day tomorrow night. We got the Pistons and the Cavs, huge matchup. We got
Yep.
Michigan State and we got Michigan both in the Sweet 16. But anyway, back to Mike Poplawski. His rookie season in the NBA, he was driving home from the game and he encountered an accident and decided to pull over and he helped save the life of fellow teammate, fellow rookie, former Duke star Bobby Hurley.
Oh, that accident. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Bobby Hurley ended up having a decent NBA career. I don't know if he was ever the same after. He's a phenomenal coach now, but Mike Poplawski helped. I'm saying helped because the story, I remember the narrative at the time was he alone did this. And, there was other people on hand that
Yeah.
certainly helped, but Mike Poplawski was there to certainly aid in Bobby Hurley's being saved. So I'm going Mike Poplawski for our Mike of the Week.
I always remember that big knee brace he wore when he was
Yes,
on the
he did a
Spartans.
RoboCop type thing.
Yes. God, it's crazy the goofy stuff you can remember from so long ago.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Education topic this week. We're going to venture a little politically because recently President Trump signed an executive order, very rare occurrence in DC, signed an executive order. Do you see all the little kids sitting around him at the desk?
Yeah, they were so happy. Now, let me just ask, was this an accidental executive order that leaked out
This is a
somehow?
group
Was
where,
it a
where
group?
one of those kids not supposed to be there. Like, did they invite the wrong kid? I don't know. Maybe it was like the Undertaker's grandson or something,
You
since
never
the
know, right?
McMahon had something to do with it. All kidding aside, and I was just asked about this last night. I was out having dinner, and somebody that was not in education asked me about my thoughts about this. I should have said, "Well, you can wait 2 days and hear about it on Pass the Mic." But what we're talking about, of course, is that I don't want to say the dismantling of the Department of Education because that will take an act of Congress. But like anything
Mhm.
else, there are ways to, and
Sure.
as this administration is showing, more so than many other, there are ways to do things. Maybe not the proper channels, but you can do things like if you all of a sudden lay everybody off and you have the right to do that, well then
Right.
it is what it is. So I just wanted to get your feedback on your thoughts on this as a teacher in the Department of Education. Like anything, I think that's out there when you hear about it news wise or people posting their own thoughts, there's an extreme this way, there's an extreme this way, and the truth is probably somewhere there in the middle. All right. So, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Man, I really do, I have a boatload of notes here, and I really don't know where to begin. I do think people in general, so there has to be an educating oneself to understand really how much this is going to impact the schools. So, to be clear, now this varies by the district, and we could just bounce ideas back and forth from each other here, Mike. I don't want to have the floor and then, how we normally do this, but whatever you want to do. But 14% of funding comes from the federal government. And, when people have asked me about this and my feelings, it's usually the only 14% of this comes, they stick to only in there at the front. As sort of a way of spinning the narrative a little bit to say that this isn't going to be the death knell of public schools, which it is not. I agree with that. However, some districts rely on this a lot more than others. You had mentioned that to me when we discussed this, a little bit before. So I'll let you kind of handle that, carry the football on that one a little bit. But it seems like obviously I'm opposed to this, but I do understand the notion, not just in education, not just it can be anything of, okay, there is wasteful spending to be found everywhere. And to be honest with you, I mean, Bill Clinton did that. This is not anything new. I think it's just being done through communicators who aren't so great at it, at communicating what they're trying to do, and then you're just chopping things in certain areas that seem to have an ideological agenda attached to them. So I sort of looked at this, I dug a little bit deeper. It seems like the administration is going after areas that have what's called woke ideas, right? And that seems to be the main focus. Now, what exactly that means, I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling I know what they mean by it, but the one area that, okay, so man, I don't even, 1979 Department of Ed was put together. It was put together for a variety of reasons. It does a number of things, including college loans, uh, you know, obviously with our history, I'm teaching the civil rights movement right now. What happened in the 60s and 70s with regard to integrating the schools? There was a civil rights agenda attached to it. Now the focus of civil rights seems to be focused squarely on anti-Semitism, which certainly is a problem. We've seen it the last year and a half or 2 years almost with regard to what's being taught with regard to Israel Palestine. It's just interesting to me on that one, it's so far one way. There's really no focus on maybe the discrimination that's going the other with regard to Palestinian feelings on this one as well. And again, both sides I think have very legitimate cases. Mike, I'm talking too much. What do you got? I don't
No,
want
I
to.
mean you're doing a great job. I think you hinted at it early. First of all, I want to stress that any zing to a public school's budget is much worse than, say, a zing to a private corporation's budget, to a slow quarter for Ford or GM,
Hmm.
because there's everything has to be offset with cuts. If revenue is down, all right, there is no okay, well, we'll raise prices on this. Well, you know what I mean?
Sure.
There's no.
Right.
So even though we say it's only this much, and again, Gibraltar schools and everything's public, you can go pull up budgets. Yes, we do get federal money. It is probably not a very large chunk, but it will be a chunk that goes missing. We had
Sure.
two bond elections in the fall, and one was a
Yeah.
sinking fund. And our superintendent made it very clear. They made it clear in our presentations to us, these could fail. Yes, here's how much money would be gone, and
Hmm.
that's black and white. Well, the
Yes.
same is with federal money. So I don't want to sound like, because yes, schools that will be hit, districts that will be hit hard are inner city poorest
Yeah.
districts, Detroit public schools,
Right.
even like suburban districts, like we talk about, like Lincoln Park locally and Taylor, that are more title
Title
schools,
one funded. Yeah.
but also not just, I don't, because you don't, but very rural schools.
Yeah.
So when we're talking like okay, Michigan, yes, when we get north of a certain point, there's a walkie bridge or whatever. But it's still, I mean, when you think of like places like out west, when I went on my road trip, when you're talking about like Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, that have extremely rural districts. I saw a TikTok this girl did that talked about like how her class size, if it got to 15, they said it was large. Imagine what type of federal money they're relying on, where you probably have like
Sure.
one teacher from each
Hmm.
subject. These are the places that are going to get that are going to get hit. Okay. And down rural South, um, and again, the line I said to this person was, even though, and this is the problem of politics, I think, whether left or right, and you and I feel the same. I think so. No, this isn't going to impact me that much. Even if it's worst case scenario, I'm very close to retirement. My son's a
Hmm.
senior; he's graduating, but it still upsets me. You understand what I'm saying? Like I'm still not happy with it and the problem we have with politics is when people say this doesn't, if they're in my shoes and it doesn't impact me that much, they're okay with it. They
Yes.
don't think of the better good. And even if that means a couple more bucks out of my paycheck or whatever, the better good is more important to me than an extra $4 a year or an extra $4 a check. Okay. And I'm not a
Absolutely.
one percenter. I'm not sitting here saying I couldn't use the $4.
Sure.
Believe me, I could. But and again, I agree too. I have no problem with finding waste. There is waste in bureaucratic mess. I was listening to the pod of Governor, um, oh my God, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank now.
Mayor Duggan.
No, it was out of California. Gavin Newsom's
Newsom.
podcast. He has,
Okay.
he has Ezra Klein on, who has his own podcast.
Yeah.
And Ezra has been very critical of the Democrats and basically
Hmm.
saying, they brought up the high speed rail that the Republicans and Fox News
Yes.
love to pile on. And Gavin Newsom pointed out, I didn't even start this. The Obama administration started the grant. They said it had to be started in this area. If we would have had it our way, we would have started in LA and San Francisco, but they wanted it started in the middle.
Sure.
And it just goes to things of like, and again, they're basically saying there's nothing wrong with auditing and checking out,
Yeah.
but we don't need the lies and the mistakes and the oops, we cut this, we shouldn't have.
Right.
Today
Which seems to keep happening.
yes, today the big news is Kennedy's cutting 10,000 jobs from
Hmm.
Health and Human Services and downsizing that, and you know whether we talk, I sent you that thing about the COVID response. There's going to be another nationwide health crisis. There always is. It was
Always.
AIDS. It was AIDS in the '80s. There's a measles outbreak right now. I have nothing wrong with the federal government trying to look out for us and being ready in case of an outbreak instead of, and we're thankful, like, okay, we're in Southeast Michigan. We have a very strong health network here. We've had nurses on in the past, thanks to the UAW, I think, really, which had a large population of unionized workforce with healthcare benefits. We have a lot of great medical resources in this Southeast area from Ann Arbor, but that's not the case everywhere.
Right.
And again, that's goofy old me, I guess, snowflake me worrying about other people. When we start slashing and cutting all this with what it's worse. I also, I hear some of this. Oh, I can't. Was it Lindsey Graham or I don't want to give a wrong testament. I mean, maybe it was Paul from Kentucky. He wants to have the NBA and NFL of teachers. This myth of dismantling the Federal Department of Education because there's so many bad teachers. We're gonna use all this money and we're gonna start paying the good teachers millions of dollars a year, and they're gonna be like the LeBron James of teaching. A
Yeah.
couple problems with that, with education. Again, the best teachers in the world, you get a mix of 30 kids in there, no matter how good you are. Okay. No matter how great
Hmm.
you are at your subject matter, with your personality, with your keeping up on technology, there are kids that just don't care. All right. And there are kids that biologically are
Yes.
not going to get it. Okay.
And this
You
is
and you
what the federal government, this is what the Department of Ed really, really does. And there's a lot of people speaking much more passionately and eloquently than I can about how much this is going to impact those kids. And it's going to be a huge impact.
so this thing
So,
like Trump saying he wants to pay the best teachers in the world, that's fine. Find me like the best teacher in the world that's doing a great job and let me drop them into a
yes.
random class, 5 hours of 30 some kids, randomized kids. They're only going to be able to do so much. Okay.
Yes.
The truth of the matter is they're in all reality, in all of our years in education, and I always like, because I'm not good at math, I always like to do things in the simple out of 10. Okay. I've been doing this 27 years now. To me, there's two types of bad teachers, right? There are truly, and I'm not even talking like criminally bad. So I guess there's three. Criminally bad that shouldn't even be in the building. I'm talking like breaking laws, doing
Sure.
things that are unacceptable. We're not even going to put them on the radar. There's no one that's going to say that they don't belong there
Right.
and they're out. In my whole career, I've never had someone that I've interacted with in 27 years that was under that area. Okay. Not one person in a building I've worked in. Okay. So then there are two other types. There is the person at the end of their career that's coasting, right? That's not just teaching, right? There are police officers who do this. There's business people, like,
Sure. Right.
retirement's there. They're coasting. In all my career of like working, for every 10 teachers, zero point 0.5, I guess, would be
Yeah.
the average. And again, to me, you're going to get that in every field. And
Right.
I wouldn't even say it's not people that do it the last year. I never saw anyone, and even those people in that last year, they were still a good teacher in that last year. They just maybe took a few more days off, you know what I mean, and didn't get as stressed out about a state test, that sort of thing. It's obvious because you're not worried about this. And then the other type of bad teacher is more on the younger end that are just overwhelmed and not prepared for the job, right, Mike? That it wasn't for them, that they know the subject matter, they just don't have classroom management, they don't have the personality. And in reality, how many of those last? They usually go on their own.
They do. And to be honest with you, a lot of times it's people that actually do know the subject matter. In fact, probably
Better.
know it better than most,
Yes.
but their communication and ability to connect with people is just lacking. And you have to have that. And unfortunately, the way the system, and this is where the system can be revamped a little bit, you don't find that out until it's too late.
Yeah.
Um, so
So,
yeah, and I mean, again,
there's a lot of myths there of like that this is going to solve this and that. And again, a lot of the federal money is hamstrung. And I hope Donald Trump and Linda McMahon are right that, okay, we're going to put this back into local control. Well, local control doesn't mean just what's going on in Mississippi and Alabama and
sure.
Florida. It also means what's going on in Connecticut, New York, California, these states that everyone thinks are awful. Which, by the way, you can pull up test data of states. Okay, just go data's data. But again, I'm not going to like spike the football or anything. We have troubles in Michigan, a purple state.
Of
All
course, of
right, but
course.
that's not because of bad teachers or bad education policy. It's because COVID was a major headache. Kids don't want to read. It's hard to keep up with cell phones. You know, even like my son who's accepted to big four universities. I got to fight with him still now at 17, 18
Yeah,
to get stuff done. All right.
right.
But it's a tale as old as time. When you were in school, when I was in school at Carlson, there were kids that were 212 doing everything
Hmm.
they needed to. There was me smack dab in the middle, like a 3.5 that, yeah, I did my stuff, but I didn't really. And then I went on and then you had people that didn't make it, didn't care, don't care. And that's tale as old as time.
So I have a just as a reading as you're talking, I was sort of thinking about this, and I got this text from Mr. Walavera, who is Kyle Walavera, who is in a different country right now, and it just deregulations. It's interesting. Be careful what you wish for. So no one wears seatbelts. Restaurants might have soap in the bathroom. Kids riding in the back of pickup trucks, sitting in the buckets on mountain highways. Lots of do-it-yourself homes made of steel plate walls and roofs. Um, so you have to be really. Oh, went for a dangerous hike with no guardrails and no and sign no waivers. Like you have to be very careful with what you
Yeah.
wish for. We don't want. I mean, again, as much as there's a bloat, and we all acknowledge there's a bloated bureaucracy, and I think Gavin Newsom touching upon that with the rail, high speed rail is a perfect one. At the same time, you don't want a libertarian's paradise either because you end up with things like that, and that's not. I wouldn't want to live in a country like that either. So
What's
let's
really
be very
funny?
careful.
And you should listen to the podcast, the episode. The law that everyone complains about California about regulation and
Hmm.
getting stuff done and doing stuff. I want to give you one guess which governor signed that law way back in the day in California.
Oh, really?
He was an actor,
Big Ron,
but not yes,
not
Ronnie.
Arnold.
Ronnie.
Yes,
I would
yes.
also, man, if I could have Ronnie on as a guest right now, I'd love to ask him about these auto tariffs.
You think how's he gonna feel
The
about the
grand old
tariffs?
party. What would even more so than Russia, because
Yeah,
Ronnie did not like the labor unions.
no,
And this is, I would love to. It's just a weird, bizarro world.
it
When I
really
saw
is.
that tariff announcement, and again, 1980 UAW worker. But again, the guy I was talking to last night, the family I was talking to, he runs a pipe fitting shop that goes into these plants and does the work. He goes, he goes, we're not ready to get this work done in these plants because these plants aren't ready. It's
Yeah,
not like, oh, we're going to flip the lights on down in
right.
Lordstown, Ohio, where they had a big GM plant and be like, oh, we're going to start making cars here. That's not how any of this works. But I don't know. I'm dreading having to get a new lease less than a year from now. I
Yeah,
honestly, I'm expecting like a $700 a month payment for a standard regular car.
yeah, and I
That's what I'm going in with.
got into it at the right time. I just got mine, so
I guess I'll deliver eggs with it or something to try to offset costs. Maybe I don't know. We'd love to hear what people think. I want to wrap up this conversation because back when we had tough times in Gibraltar, when there was economic issues, Bill Stevenson always had a great line. There'll be school in the fall,
school
and
gonna
that's what
fall.
I
Yeah,
want to. There will be school in the fall, one way or another.
yeah.
There'll be school in September. I think is how he always
We we
worded
we might only have one teacher on a Segway going all the way around, but that's
it. Cliff's gonna have to dust off that Segway he had. All right, overrated, underrated. And by the way, we came up with this topic before the big news in Washington broke out with the group text.
yeah, we
The group,
did. You're right. Didn't even think about that.
this was not even. We decided we thought this was like a good topic to have. Watch what you put in your group text. I also heard that this guy that put him in the text, all of his Venmo transactions are public too. Like on Venmo, you can either be public or private.
Oh yeah,
As the
really?
director of national security, and he's showing like who he's paying for a slice of pizza and an Uber ride. But whatever. Um, First of all, I'm a Gen X, so I'm one of the that we're both Gen X. We're sort of that group that helps our parents with technology, but also we're pretty good with technology. Have you ever had accidentally? Well, we've come close to accidentally having somebody in a group text. We've seen this in emails and stuff, but I've never had a contact enter my phone without me knowing it. I don't know about you. Have you ever had
No,
a contact?
I have not. Not that I know of anyway, I
I don't know.
guess.
Maybe someone needs to go tell the five that on Fox that contacts don't just jump into your phone. All right, overrated, underrated gadgets. What is your overrated gadget?
All right, so I'm really I didn't want to do this, but I feel like it has been you mentioned phones earlier and how it has revamped education. I like the idea of Chromebooks, but I really think that what kids have done in our district is they found ways to use Chromebooks the way they were using their phones. And so I'm going Chromebooks. And again, overrated doesn't mean bad, but I just think it's another easy distraction. They play games on them. It's another easy distraction of what is just and again, Mike, again, this is not what would you and I have done if we would have been given these devices. I'd have been playing Tech Mobile
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
so overrated doesn't mean bad, but I just feel like it has taken kids further and further away from sometimes the traditional brick and mortar classroom that in some ways was working. It wasn't working completely. And I'm not going to be a boomer here and nostalgize, everything that came before. But I do think on this one, I think it's overrated in a sense that if your district doesn't have them, it makes, other districts are going to sell that we do come to our district. And I don't know if that's necessarily always the best thing.
That's a good one. I'm going to go with, and there's a term already for this. The people, it's an iPad, and it's the iPad Kids, right? Like that's what's taken over. And I get it. You know, I was thankful that iPads really started like as my kids were already getting into elementary. So like, but I know a lot of people like when you go out to eat, right? Like, and there's like a family like
Yeah.
with young kids, and they're all like on a tablet. Just for, and again, I'm sure they do great work. I have one that I picked up now for like cross country, and I'm still a laptop guy. I have my own laptop here that I'm recording this on home. I'm a pen and paper guy. I use my phone obviously, but and I know there's people that like an iPad, that's their thing. That's their they attach a keyboard to it, whatever. I mean, that's great. I just think that more so than even the phone, because I think phones people still held out on giving one to their kid or whatever till like what middle schoolish. But kids were given tablets at like 2 or 3 years old and they like lose their mind.
Right.
Like if you try
Right.
to take it away or
Hmm.
something. And again, I'm not listen, parenting is hard. Again, the same thing like you said. If the iPad was about 7 years earlier, would my kids have probably been on one? More than likely, they probably would have.
Hmm.
Because let's face it, when you're going on when you're going out to eat and they're just like immersed in it. And again, if you go back to the famous story about Steve Jobs, right? He didn't even give them to his kids, right?
Right.
That guy interviewed him, and he's like, no, we don't even. I don't want to. That should have said a lot,
Yeah,
actually.
absolutely.
So, because he was a smart guy. So mine is the iPad asterisk smartwatch. I don't wear a watch at all. I get it for like counting your steps and everything, and but to me, it's like if I was ever going to go back to wearing a watch, I think I'd wear just a standard nice watch. You know, I don't need all that. But
Would
all
you
right, what
have
do you got? Is
a Swatch watch?
Casio calculator.
Yeah, okay, right.
Remember
Uh,
remember by the way, check for smartwatches when the SAT starts up here in another week.
oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
We're almost
So
there. All right, underrated.
underrated.
All right, so it's funny because I mentioned the Department of Ed, 1979. Walkman came out in 1979. 1979, Mike, was a very hugely impactful year in the Middle East and world events. But on this one, I'm going with the Walkman. That was the year the Walkman was invented, and I just think about now. I mean, I'm on these headphones here, and I think Walkman is again, just like every other technology, it can control us, but I find it to be really, really, really helpful to me in certain circumstances. If I'm running, I love having my earbuds in, and Walkman was kind of precursor to that. They weren't the first headphones. There's actually forms of headphones that go back 100 years before that, but the Walkman as a precursor of what we use now, I'm going with that.
All right, good one. Mine's a very unique and vague, but I use it now and I think about it. It's something that is I consider it a gadget. So I have a LiftMaster garage door. Okay. And you can buy this little relay thing that's right up here by my router up here. And you download the app. It's basically a smart garage door. So you can use the app to open or close your garage door. If I really wanted to, I could share like a randomized code with Amazon. So like if you ever ordered some or FedEx, I think Amazon has it built into their system where you can give them the access to open and close it. You know what I mean? And the best part is because this is always my big thing. We drive away from going somewhere, like the car's all
Yeah.
loaded, and me, the wife, and the kids turn on to Huron River, and Elisa's like, "Hey, did you shut the garage?"
Yeah.
And I know I shut the garage. I know I hit the button, but because she said that, I don't. The human brain is very
Right.
funny.
Right.
Like, so I have to turn around and go back and look. Well,
Sure.
now I'm like, just open up the app because the app shows opened or closed 2 minutes ago. I'll get text from Nate, driving, he'll pull into the school parking lot and like he leases down. He's like, did I shut the garage? I get those from everyone because they don't all have the app. And I'll look, I'm like, it's shut. So to me, this smart garage door opener that gives you the ability to open and close it and see its status, as long as you have power, obviously this goes with anything else. So like those people that get locked out of their houses with like
Yeah.
the door locks. That's why I carry a key with me all the time anyway. But smart garage door openers.
Didn't you have some issues with that when you
What?
first hooked it up? Was that the one you told me about earlier this week?
Yeah, I did. That's why. Well, that wasn't. I always had it. Here's the thing: the keypads. You have a keypad. Have you ever had a
Mhm.
keypad on your door? Well,
Yeah,
eventually those buttons. I mean, it's outside. It's to the elements. Eventually, the contacts go on those buttons. We're talking like 6, 7 years.
sure.
So, like, I changed the code once, but now it's like getting. It doesn't work. So you go on Amazon, and there's a. Thankfully, I got this in before the tariffs. I guess there's a legit LiftMaster one that's like $46, and then there's like a Chinese knockoff that's like $14. And so I'm like, I'll try the $14 one.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it worked, but I accidentally hit the wrong program button. I programmed it, but I wiped out everything else that had been programmed, the cars, even the remotes, because I hit the wrong program button. It took some time, but again, everything's now programmed. But smart garage door opener, yes. So, one thing I wanted in my notes before we get to hot mic, I saw this. I missed my opportunity for the joke. It doesn't matter about schools because Bill Gates says there's only going to be 3 jobs in the next 10 years or so because of AI.
Oh
So
yeah.
go to school for either being a coder. I'm looking at it right now. A coder. I don't know how people are going to pay the bills. Energy experts or biologists. So if you don't have one of
That's
those three
it.
degrees, you better not even buy a Segway because you're going to be picking up, I guess, other than to pick up empties. So that's what Bill Gates says. So what's it matter anyway? We don't need the Department of Ed
Yeah.
because I guess unless it's biology coder school, um, don't need anything. So,
Yeah.
all right, hot mic take. What do you got this week?
So it's really interesting. I had two incidents this week that involved the NBA. So the first is my nephew, Alex, was a former guest on the show. He got a hold of me. Now he gets free stuff from the NBA all the time because of his social media posts. And I thank you, Alex, for this. I got two new pairs of Kobe's coming to me real soon. I'm very excited about this, free of charge, of course. So that's for starters. And Alex actually uh, was in the running to do some social media stuff for the Washington Wizards. He ultimately decided against it, but I just found that really interesting that that's available. And then I went to the Piston game on Tuesday. They played the Spurs, and I'm in the store, and I hear, "Hey, Gio, what's up?" And Gio is like my old nickname from people that knew me before, and it's an old friend of mine from high school named Merrick, who is working for the Pistons as a photographer.
Oh,
And I,
cool.
I said, "How did you get the job?" And he's a part-time worker, so he's not full-time. And he said, "You know what? Somebody just kind of mentioned it, so I sort of just contacted the team, and they said, yeah." So and again, he's not making enough money to live off of. He said it's kind of like just an additional, it's a supplements his income. But he was doing some really neat stuff. So he's down on the court. He sent me some screenshots. It was Big Sean's birthday that day. Big
Okay.
Sean gave a speech before the game where he dropped an MFer. It was a little, it was a great
Not
speech.
family, not family friendly.
Not family friendly. He said, and get ready for the MF and playoffs. I was like, oh man. I thought it was kind of funny. I looked to my right, there was like a 6-year-old there. I was like, ugh. But anyway, he sends me a picture of him and Big Sean. And I'm just watching him down on the court, kind of go wherever he wants. And it just started with a suggestion from somebody, and that's where it went. So I guess, the moral of the story of what I'm getting at for this hot mic topic is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a sports team or anything like that, but you'll never know if you don't try. And this isn't for me to tell, like, I'm not going to make the NBA, and I wasn't going to make the NBA. So I'm not saying that, but if you can just like, what you're skilled at, reach out to people. You never know what's out there. And, I just thinking about what he's doing, I'd probably do that for free. I think it's awesome. And he's just, taking pictures of people, take it, like, it looks really cool. So yeah, what do you,
That's cool, and it could be, and that's how things start too. Like, okay, I hear, like you said, he's just part time. All of a sudden, like if he's a good worker, and all of a sudden, you don't just get hired when you go look at like these positions for like these sports teams. You have to start somewhere,
yeah.
and like they're not just going to hire you as the photographer, the official team photographer, day one. That
Right.
all, you start on the ground floor and they start liking your work and then you get promoted.
Hmm.
Again, that may never happen, but
Right.
that's the way it's going to happen,
Sure.
and good for him. And again, he may not even want that. He just enjoys that.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. It's something that I totally, we joke around a lot about, things that we'd love to do that on the side or this or that. And that's definitely one. I guess I'm in major political mode. So March
Uh-oh.
23rd, 2010, you know what happened that date?
That wasn't, was that the, that wasn't the oil spill, was it?
No, it's actually, well, now looking at it, very good news. Back then, you would have
Obamacare.
thought this person, yes, Obama, do you say
Okay.
Obamacare?
Yeah.
Yes. So the American Care, the ACA Act, the Affordable Care Act was signed March 23rd, 2010. They just had an anniversary of it. Um, John Boehner and company would have thought it was the end of the world, would have you thinking it was the end of the world, and they should have locked Obama up for what was pulled off. Ironically, I just went and pulled up the favorability, unfavorability numbers by KFF.org, which is a health industry watchdog group. Uh, you know what the favorability number is now? 64%,
Wow.
which in the United States of America is tough to get,
Wow.
you know, 36 unfavorable. Um, I had no problem with it back then. The only problem I have with it now is that it was weakened. The whole purpose of making people buy healthcare, which by the way, you have to buy auto insurance, or if you don't, you get fined,
Hmm.
right? Like the whole purpose of it was again, and the people won't, and the truth of the matter, the way it was designed was a weakened stance that the Democrats wanted.
Right. They start from
But
a position of compromise.
the idea is if everyone's insured, that helps keeps costs down.
Sure.
That's the truth of the matter is because uninsured people, when they go to an emergency room,
Hmm.
have to be treated.
Right.
And that money is then just being
Passed
spread
off to
around.
us.
And
Yeah.
then it's, yeah. So and again, that was the design. And people would tell you, oh, it was about taking away freedoms. That wasn't the design. That got thrown out, of course, by the Supreme Court. But speaking now as a father of a 20-year-old that's going to graduate, who could graduate in December, I think she's going to end up graduating next spring, as a 21-year-old, that I can now rest assured that she's going to have healthcare coverage till 25, 26 under Elisa and myself if she can't find a job right away. Or even if she
Hmm.
can find a job right away, she doesn't have to worry about that expense. We can keep her on ours as something that's beneficial to her. I thank the Democrats that went out on a limb and passed this, and President Obama. Um, 2025 is not like the 1980s, back when you were 18 and could find a job with benefits and
Hmm.
be good to go. It wasn't like that in the 90s when we graduated. We've
Right.
talked about this before. When I graduated college, American Airlines found out, my dad, you're gone. You're off the insurance.
Hmm.
And for a 19 or an 18 or 19-year-old, or now even like a 21, 22-year-old that's graduating college that has the a luxury afforded to them because of the fact, and I'm not even talking about pre-existing conditions, which are the whole other aspect of it. That's an amazing aspect for these poor
Hmm.
people that couldn't get insurance. I again think, and again, I'm in that 64%, and a lot of you are late to the party and realize it wasn't really that bad. It was just that we can't let this guy have this victory. And that's what it was always about. That's what it was always about. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And rarely is anything in politics and government perfect. But these things that it improved on had to be improved. And more so now, 15 years later. I can't imagine a young adult trying to get insurance now. Um, the benefit this has for them that they can stay on their parents and be a dependent for that long is what was needed because the country has definitely changed.
What was interesting about it, I remember too, though it wasn't just the people on the right, there was a lot on the left
I
that
wanted
were
more.
just, yeah, they wanted more. And they felt like he had started from too much of a position of compromise. So the right was attacking it as, if you give us health care, it's taking away our freedom somehow. And then the left, it was they wanted more. They didn't like the position of compromise immediately. And so, yeah, I remember it quite well. By the way, I looked up the oil spill in Louisiana was April, I think April 10th, it said 2010. So not long after this. But yeah, the attacks were endless, relentless. And if you remember correctly, too, the rollout wasn't that smooth, as is any rollout in almost
Yeah, that
anything.
it's funny going back full circle. Ezra Klein talks about that with the Democrats. They get a problem, they try to solve it, and when a law is, and it's not just Democrats, a bill is passed, a law is passed, and it's sort of like forgotten about. And the most important part is the implementation, and sometimes that gets lost in the woodwork, and that's obviously what happened with the rollout. I mean, and again, there was spiking of the football and this and that. And it was something I think that was resolved quickly, but again, when your rollout has to be your rollout.
Sure.
But again, to me, it's the benefits of the law itself. And to me, the pre-exist, but more so than anything is the fact that dependents can remain on their parents' insurance, which in this day and age, I think is so important because it's a totally different time. 30, 40 years ago, when someone graduated high school, most of the time they found a job that had benefits,
Correct.
or they went to college and they got to stay on and they found a job that had benefits. That's the way it was. And it's so hard now for these young kids. And again, it's just something that I don't have to stress about. And I think that's a fair number. 25, 26, that's a fair number in this day and age. Like at
I
that point, you
think
either
you're
find a job or start paying for it cash.
when you say 20 or 30, 40 years ago, I think you have to mean 40, 50 years ago. And I'm
Yeah,
not trying to split hairs and argue
no.
semantics, but I think that's an important distinction because this was passed in 2010.
Yeah,
30
that's
years
right.
ago is
We're just getting
1995. We're not
yeah.
like
No,
we weren't,
that's when we were having trouble.
yes, we were
Like
right, right.
even like the UAW was hard to get into,
Yeah,
and again, this is you're not getting benefits. Most places are trying not to give benefits because they are expensive. They're again, did Obamacare bring costs down or everything? I can't, and there's always inflation. I mean, medical care, I mean, it's
sure.
crazy. Like have you ever looked at like an itemized bill
It's
when
insane.
you,
It really is.
when you have something done with insurance? Like I'm sure I'm going to see it like this colonoscopy I had. And I'm very blessed and fortunate that throughout the career, like my parents had good insurance, my wife and I have good insurance. And I'm hopeful that, like I said, my son turns 18. Chloe is 20. That's 5 to 7 years left. That's something we can provide them with. And it's again, and I under the old system, pre-ACA, you were done. You were done if you weren't a full-time student, you were done at 18. Okay. And if you weren't and if you once you graduated college and were no longer claimed as a dependent, you were done at 21, 22. And it's a very scary feeling when one accident, you talk about like a car accident, you pull out and get into a car accident, have to go to the ER, could bankrupt you, literally.
Yeah. I think
So,
it'd be pretty cool to go back and look at some of, because Facebook was a thing then. Look at
yeah.
some of people's posts who are now, parents of people that age and how their tunes, I'm sure, have changed.
Well, there were a lot of myths with it. And it wasn't, again, I think the one thing, it's not perfect. It's not, again, but it's hard to get perfect out of
There
DC
were,
nowadays.
man, I can't I forget the death panels.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Remember that? Sarah Palin. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and again, people working in healthcare, you may think otherwise or whatever. I'm looking at it through those two facets. That's what I'm looking
Right.
at, and I'm acknowledging it's not perfect, and it is what it is. So Michigan State tomorrow. Do you want to do this?
Let's do it.
All right. So Michigan is playing the number one team, Auburn. A lot of the stuff I see online said Auburn is ripe for a loss here. They say they've been bad since, not bad, but have been struggling since January, and Michigan's on an upswing. I think it really comes down to I think it's going to be like one of those things is what conference is better, the SEC or Big Ten? Because, there's not a lot of intermingling. So it's hard to say, because there's a lot of good SEC teams. There's currently some pretty good Big Ten teams. The Wisconsin loss was a little bit of a stinger. But what do you got? Michigan, um, Auburn.
My heart says Michigan. My head says Auburn. So I'm going to go with my heart on this one and predict the upset. Michigan will win this game by about three.
Also, you're taking Michigan.
Taking Michigan.
Okay. And then
It was 12 years ago around this time. It was actually a week before, chronologically, in terms of dates and everything. But they took on Kansas, if I'm not mistaken, was the number one seed. Trey Burke made a half court or near half court shot, or logo shot to send it to overtime. Then Michigan ended up winning and make it to the national title game. This wouldn't be that was a less of an upset than this would be. But that was a very good Kansas team that they beat. So I'm gonna say Lightning's gonna strike again, and Michigan's gonna pull off the upset.
and they're what? I think they're like 7 point underdogs. Is that
I
what it
think it's
is?
9.5 right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So people are, okay. What about Michigan State and their matchup tomorrow night? Old Miss.
I think Michigan State right now is playing at a level. They have guard play that, to me, I hear this all the time, from state people. Their jump shooting is lacking a lot of times, but I think their guard play is so good. Their bigs are physical enough. I really think this could be Izzo's second national title. So I'm picking them
Oh,
to win.
wow.
I'm
So
picking them to
they,
win
according to
big.
what I'm pulling up right now, they are 3.5 point favorites. Um, I'm not picking, I'm picking both to win. And then I dread this state if that happens because I can't do as a state of Michigan man. because they're looking more and more like Nate's going to Michigan State. So I honestly am literally going to become a state of Michigan man. I don't even know what to expect if
Well, you
that
know,
happens.
Mike Valeni was talking about this the other day on 97.1, and I think he's pretty good, but he was really stoking the fires. I think this game, I don't want it to happen. I never want these two teams to play. And I get what he's saying, and it's really become nasty. But I think he's contributed to it, and he's one of the top radio personalities in the country. But that's kind of what his point was. So he didn't want the game at all. And as a state of Michigan guy, I mean, that looks fun and it's never happened. But
It
on the
does.
flip side, why is everything so nasty? And
I know.
I actually sent them a text. I normally don't, but I said, I think you guys are playing the lowest common denominator here. I think people can generally handle themselves.
Well, we've also talked about this before. I think basketball is a little tamer. It was definitely tamer, I think, when it was Beeline and Izzo. And I don't think there's much to dislike about the current coach. So again, I don't think there's as much nastiness as there is with football. I just think it's just natural.
Sure.
And again, I think less people care, to be honest with you.
That's
I
true.
don't.
That's very true.
That's just the matter of it. But I know there's some Michigan people that don't like Izzo, but I mean, it's like to me one of those things. Like, yes, he whines. I get that part, but I mean, you got to respect what he's done, even if you aren't a state fan. I mean, and again, his
I,
speech the other day got a lot of
oh yeah.
play
Yeah.
with people all over the country about the transfer portal, which is
Yes.
obviously crazy that it
Yes.
opens up
It's
going into
great.
the
It's
Sweet 16.
insane. And again, but you know what? And he's right. I think Izzo is amazing. I don't like the whining, but you could say about 95% of the coaches. Nonetheless, um, coaches are leaving right now, though.
Yeah.
This, so again, I agree with you on the players, but we have coaches leaving. The McNeese State coach had committed to leave before the tournament started. Like it's
Yeah. Remember when Bill Frieder did that?
Yeah, and you know what? I've as the years have gone on, I've become less and less of a Bo Schembechler person. That was the one he got
That
rid of.
was
I
one
thought,
move that was good. That was one
and
move that he
without
did.
even knowing the result, which they won
Yeah.
their only national
Yeah.
title. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, hey, enjoy the end of spring break. Have a great week, and we will see you next week.